In this podcast, I'm going to be comparing Catullus 3 and Horace's Ode 1.19. The scanned Latin of Catullus 3 is as follows. Lugeto veneres cupidinesque et quantest hominum venestiorum passer mortuus est meae puellae passer deliciae meae puellae quem plus loculis suis amabat nam me litus erat suam cenorat ipsa tam bene quam puella matrem nexe sacrem iulius moebat sed circumciliens modiluc ad solam dominasque pipiabat qui nunc id periter tenebricosum illuc unde negant redire quemquam at vobis malesit male lae tenebrae orci quam ia bella devoratis tam bellum hi passer abstulistis o factum male o misere passer tua nunc opera meae puellae flendo turgiduli ubento celi. This translates to, Mourn, O Venuses and Cupids, and however great a number of rather attractive men there are. The sparrow of my girl died, the sparrow, the pet of my girl, whom that girl was loving more than her own eyes, for it was honey sweet, and it knew its mistress herself as well as a girl knows her mother. Nor was it moving itself from the lap of that one, but jumping now hither, now thither, was chirping continuously for its mistress alone, who now goes through the gloomy journey thither, from whence they deny anyone to return. But may it be bad for you all, bad darknesses of Orcus, you who devour all beautiful things. You have taken away from me such a beautiful bird. O evil deed! O wretched little bird! The swollen eyes of my girl now are red because of crying because of your work. Now for Horace 1.19. Mater sae va cupidinum Thebanae que iubet me semelae puer et lasci valicentia finitis animum redera moribus urit me glicerae litor splendentis pario marmore purius urit grata protervitas et voltus nemium lubricus ad speci in me tot haruens venus caeprum deseruit nec patitor schithas et versis animo sequis parthum dicere nec quae nihil attinent. Hic vivum mihi cae spitic verbe nas pueri ponite turaque bimi cum patera meri mactata veniet lenior ostia. This means the savage mother of Cupids and the boy of Theban Semele in the wanton license order me to return the spirit to love's having been bounded. The brightness of glycera burns me, shining more pure than Parian marble. Pleasing wantonness in a face too slippery to be seen burn me. All Venus, rushing against me, departs from Cyprus, and she does not allow me to speak of Scythians and the Parthians spirited with the horse having been turned, or those things which have nothing to do with love. Here put the living turf for me. Here put olive branches, boys, and put incenses with a bowl of 2-year-old wine. She will come more gentle with a sacrifice having been offered. All in all, both Catullus and Horace write compelling love poems, Catullus 3 and Horace 1.19, that indicate the power of Venus and break away from the standard Roman tradition of writing war poems. However, Horace displays a much more active approach than Catullus in dealing with the pains of love, mirroring Horace's authority-defying mindset. First, I'm going to talk about meter. Catullus writes in hendecasyllabic. Horace wrote his poem in second Asclepiadean, which creates a much faster and more rushed sound, which reflects the feeling that he is burned, in contrast to the more somber poem of Catullus about the death of a pet. Next, I'm going to analyze sound patterns from each poem. Line 9 of Catullus 3, from sed to illoc, is one polysyllabic participle placed next to 4 short adverbs combined by elisions. It emphasizes the short amount of time that the bird spent in one place before jumping. In Horace 1.19, the molasses in line 6, from splendentis to purius, the brightness of glycera, shining more pure than Parian marble, emphasizes the brightness of glycera and shows how deeply Horace is affected by love. Rhetorical devices from the poem emphasize both distractions from love and the pain that love causes. In addition to apostrophe and anastrophe, in Catullus 3, Catullus employs a synchesis in line 9, from sed to illoc, but jumping now hither, now thither. It emphasizes the movement of the jumping bird, in addition to illustrating the interlockedness of Lesbia and the sparrow, who is jumping around in her lap. Now I'm going to delve a little deeper into the abstract analysis of both poems. Both touch on distractions from love. Horace, but they do this from the roles of different genders. In Catullus, the sparrow distracted Lydia from loving Catullus. Thus, Catullus sarcastically says statements such as, "Tam ta abstulistis, you have taken away from me such a beautiful sparrow." Catullus is glad that this sparrow has died, because now Lydia will have more time to spend with Catullus. In Horace details former distractions that would cause a man to spend less time pursuing love, from in to Atinen. All Venus rushing against me departs from Cyprus, and she does not allow me to speak of Scythians, and the Parthians spirited with the horses having been turned, or those things which have nothing to do with love. Venus will not let Horace write poetry about war, and instead makes him talk about love, dominating his entire life. Now for the portrayal of Venus, the goddess of love, whom both authors call upon in their poems. Venus is a commonly depicted goddess in the art of love-stricken poets and authors even today. And Catullus addresses Venus with an apostrophe, from Lugete to Venestiorum. Mourn, O Venuses and Cupids, and however great a number of rather attractive men, sarcastically telling Venus and men who incite love to mourn because the sparrow of Lesbia died. In fact, the passer, sparrow, is a symbol of Venus, but the bird ironically got in the way of the relationship of Catullus and Lydia, since Lydia spent too much time playing with the bird. In Horace, Venus is one subject of the verb in the first statement, from mater to amoribus, the savage mother of the Cupids and the boy of Theban semele and wanton license order me to return to loves having been bounded. Venus and Bacchus in wantonness force Horace to return to loves that he once managed to restrain. You could almost say put a fence around. In Horace 1.19, Horace claims that Venus works against him. In me tota ruins Venus, all Venus rushing against me. Moreover, when pleading to the gods, Catullus merely sits idly and shouts at Pluto, in contrast to Horace, who actively appeases Venus by offering sacrifices. Catullus writes, At vobis malai tenebrae orci, quae omnia bella deoratis, but may it be bad for you all, bad darknesses of Orcus, you who devour all beautiful things. Both poets also include relationships between humans and animals. In Horace's poem, the Scythians illustrate the use of the horse as an advantage in war, whereas Catullus paints a picture of the relationship between Lydia and the sparrow, the loving relationship between Lydia and the sparrow. In fact, the sparrow in Catullus's poem has human-like attributes, and some scholars even argue that the sparrow is an extended metaphor for Catullus himself, suggesting that the poem has subtle, provocative messages. This theory was proposed by Poliziano, a scholar of the Florentine Renaissance. However, it has been refuted adamantly by a scholar named H.D. Jocelyn. In a frequently cited scholarly paper called Unnecessarily Indecent Interpretations of Catullus 2 and 3, Jocelyn stated, There's no way of discussing rationally such propositions as those made by the Genovese, that there are many subtle symbolic levels on which the poem canon should be read, and that on one of these the passer is a male organ. I agree with Jocelyn, and the fact that the passer is dead makes Policiano's profane interpretation seem preposterous. Both of these poems also reflect the poetic stance of each author. Catullus was born in Cisalpine Gaul, outside of Rome, and belonged to a wealthy family. Thus he received an amazing education that enabled him to write poetry at such a high level. Catullus was a neoteric writer, and focused on writing short, polished poems that break from the norms of society. Catullus III reflects this style of writing. Catullus III is merely 16 lines and uses extensive rhetorical devices, such as anastrophe, apostrophe, and sympachesis. In the phrase, passer deliciae mei puellae, the sparrow, the pet of my girl, it can also be translated as the delight of my girl, which is a particularly neoteric word, in addition to words that Catullus uses in other poems such as clever and sweet. Horace was born outside of Rome to a wealthy freedman, and always felt as an outsider looking in. He also adopted many neoteric mannerisms. Both of these aspects are visibly reflected in the third stanza of Horace 1.19, from In to Atinen. Here, he details not being able to write anything other than love poems, veering from the war poems and traditions of Rome. Horace rejected power when he denied the request to become a personal secretary of Augustus, turning down authoritative figures. Likewise, in the final stanza of Horace's poem, he makes sacrifices in order that Mactata venia lenior hostia, she may come more gentle with the sacrifice having been offered, attempting to defy the power of Venus in any way possible. To sum it up, both poems detail distractions from love and the power of Venus, but Horace's much more active approach than Catullus's reflects his denial of authority that he maintained throughout his life.